Welcome back, everyone, to the Talking Devils podcast, brought to you by talkingtodevils.co.uk. I am your host, Keane Franey, and this is our weekly Manchester United podcast, brought to you by Talking to the Devils. I'm joined here today by Phil Marsh, former Manchester United player, and also joined by Manchester United author Wayne Barton. So we're here today to talk all things Manchester United, all the latest news, and also talk about the Brentford game the other night, and also towards the back end of the show, we will be talking about Phil's all-time Manchester United 11. So that should be very interesting and in depth as to who's in Phil's all-time Manchester United 11. But first of all, guys, the first thing I'd like to talk about here this evening is obviously the big, massive news that came out a couple of days ago is the signing of Rafael Varan. Obviously coming from Real Madrid, highly accomplished centre-back, four-time Champions League winning centre-back, World Cup winning, has won every single trophy kind of known in football at domestic level. Phil, I'll just come to you first. What are your first thoughts about the signing of Rafael Varan, and kind of what do you think that's going to do for Manchester United's defence?
Yeah, I obviously think it's a great signing. You know, his record speaks for itself, and obviously bringing a player of that calibre into the club, speaks volumes, I think, for obviously where the club are looking to go. And, with the other signings that they brought in, that seems as though, their aim is to improve, and hopefully now we can kick on and, challenge, realistically now for a title with them kind of players. I think the partnership that him and Maguire will sort of have is great. I think the chemistry between them two players will obviously be great. I think Maguire's an obviously great player, but with the pace and sort of experience from Varan as well now, I think that's obviously a position that we needed to strengthen. I think he's going to be a massive player for us this season. So hopefully he can hit the ground running. Obviously he's played at the top level at Real Madrid. He's won, everything you can win domestically and in the European game. So hopefully he can, settle straight away and be a big player for us this season.
Yeah, massively. I massively agree. And I think when you mentioned one word there is chemistry. Like, I think when you look at Varane and Maguire's, both of their kind of attributes as centre-backs, you have Maguire, who's very kind of no-nonsense, likes stepping out of the back and likes being tight to his man, whereas kind of Varane's kind of that player who has that bit of pace. He's like kind of almost nearly like a sweeper almost, in terms that, like, you see many years when he played with Real Madrid, Ramos would go out and attack the ball, and Varane would kind of be there as that kind of player who'd kind of guard him. He'd always win that second ball. He'd always time his tackles very well. I think they'll complement each other very much at the back. And I think when you look at kind of the whole structure, the back four, you've in my opinion, like the most informed fullback in the world, and Luke Shaw there. You have Harry Maguire, who had a fantastic Euros and a fantastic second half of the season for Manchester United. You obviously have Armand Bissaka, who is young and can improve. And when you talk about 1v1 defending, he's one of the best there is out there in Europe. And then look, we've two very good goalkeepers in Henderson or David De Gea, who, look, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of who's going to be number one, but whoever is there, we do have kind of a very, very good back five. And as you said, if we're looking to challenge for a title, we have all the ingredients there, in terms from a defensive aspect to definitely, prosper next season and definitely challenge. Because look, as we seen last season, our attacking, we don't have the problem scoring goals. Last year, I think there was a lot of kind of problems at the back, and I think you look at that now, that's being addressed with the signing of Rafael Varan. I think that's a sign that can definitely help us, propel to a title challenge next season, and maybe a few trophies as well. Wayne, what was your initial thoughts on the signing? Obviously, you look at the fee, £34 million plus £8 million add-ons, which equates to £42 million for a world-class centre-back. Considering fees Man United have paid down the years for centre-backs, it's pretty much a bargain, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you was going to say that you swap the Maguire and Varane fees around, you'd probably think that was more accurate. But so yeah, we probably got a bit of a steal with Varane. I would say that there's, I rate him. Obviously, he's one of the top centre backs in the world. Don't make any mistake about that. I do have a little bit of concern that it might take him a little bit of time to blend in that defence. I'm sure Phil can remember, Jaap Stam took a while to settle in. He had Nicholas and Elka running him ragged for a couple of months. Unlucky that he came up against an Elka a couple of times. So you look at the fixture list and think maybe it might be a little bit kinder for Varan to sort of settle into English football. But he will need a little bit of time. Maguire, if we remember, he took a little bit of time as well. In fact, some people might even say that it took him until the middle of last season to really show his best form. I remember the first few months, there was a couple of games, Villa and Arsenal at home, where we defended horribly, and you wondered if we'd ever get that offside trap sorted. And sometimes it felt like Maguire was culpable of that. You know, he was the one causing the problem. But obviously, Maguire's matured into a centre-back that is very much worthy of his place in the back line. And he looks like a player who, once you get a good partner next to him, that he would become even better. And Varane looks like he's got those kind of qualities. Maguire's a tackler, he's a good reader of the game. When you have a tackling centre-back, it's sometimes better to have a centre-back who doesn't like to tackle. And by that, I mean, is a better reader of the game.
Yeah.
Ferdinand was excellent at that sort of stuff. I know there's a comment in there about Ferdinand in our chat already about him being a sort of Ferdinand replacement, Varane. And I don't think they're like for like, but they do have that kind of similar outlook on the game. You think that they're good readers of the ball. I'd like to see how Varane adapts to sort of the pace of the Premier League, whether or not he gets tempted into tackles or whether he can read the game, if his positional sense is good enough for that. I do worry a little bit sometimes because you saw QPR last weekend, Wan-Bissaka didn't play very well. And sometimes I think when you've got a defender, when they're playing alongside defenders who aren't the usual partners, it can bring a lot of errors, and sometimes people blame the wrong people. You know, that happens with United's defence a lot. If you look at the goal that we conceded in the Europa League final, everyone got blamed for it, and I guess everyone was responsible. But you have that kind of problem, really. And all of this to say, really, I'm really excited about Varane. I think he's a massive upgrade. He's one of the best defenders in the world. We've got him for a steal. It's the kind of signing that does propel us into that talk of we should be talking about a title challenge now. But I would still urge a little bit of caution from fans to give him a little bit of chance to settle in. We've got a very reactionary fan base, as we know. If he makes one mistake, they'll be on his back saying, "Oh, he's dead, he's rubbish," and all that. That's why Madrid let him go. But I think, give him a little bit of time. His quality will show. And the funny thing is with Ole is, like, I tend to think that all of his signings have been successful, some more successful than others. You never really heard of a dominant player he always wanted to play alongside Maguire. You knew that he wanted Maguire, but there was never an obvious choice that you would say was going to be the number one selection. We heard a lot about Pau Torres and things like that.
And Koundé, other players like that as well, yeah.
Upamecano of Leipzig as well. So you had all these different names, but never anyone who stood out as the number one choice. Varane's obviously done that. He sort of emerged as this first choice, and I would trust Ole with that. Trust him first of all because Varane's an excellent centre back, but trust him because it's his choice. And I'm excited about that defence because it's the first time since Rafa, Rio, Vida, and Evra that we've looked like we've got a four that you would pick as first choice.
Definitely. It looks like we definitely have the opportunity to have a settled back four. I think it's something that we probably haven't had in the last kind of, let's say, 4 or 5 years, especially when you look at kind of like Bailey, Lindelof kind of chopping and changing, Jones Small and chopping and changing. Looks like we have kind of a setback four that we can definitely have for years to come. And look, I'm just going to come to another comment there as well. I'd like to touch on it as well. Victoria's Secret says he has won every final he's been in. Having that winning mentality is exactly what we need. And I think like the signing of Rafael Varan can definitely, rub off on the younger players. You have your Mason Greenwoods, you have your Scott McTominays, you have your Marcus Rashfords, players like that, who can learn from, albeit he is a defender. But he has a winning mentality. He knows what it means to be in the biggest games, to win the biggest trophies. And having many of them players can definitely just help the overall mentality in the dressing room. And as the comment says here, like Varane brings pace, a winning mentality to the back line, and he's an organizer. Exactly. And like think about Harry Maguire as well. Like he likes to step out and likes to take the man. Whereas, Varane can keep that line. Do you know what I mean? In terms of when you talk about the offside trap is something that we could perfect. Now we have someone who's an organizer back there who can help us. When we're playing against teams who may have a bit of pace up front, that we can time the offside trap to a T. And Varan is very well versed as a centre back, and he's played at the top level, and he's played with Sergio Ramos, who arguably in the last, along with Rio, Vidic, John Terry, defenders like that, who up there the best defenders in the last kind of 10-20 years. So he's definitely developed in the right way at Real Madrid, and now we're getting him bang in his prime. So 100%, it's a fantastic sign. And you mentioned, Wayne, if you talked about Maguire and Varane and you talked about the fees, it could have been the other way around, but still fantastic business for what we got him for, and fair play to the club for getting that done swiftly as well. Something else I'd just like to touch on, guys, is obviously the game a couple of days ago against Brentford at Old Trafford. Entertaining 2-2 draw. If anyone who's seen the game live or watched the highlights, the goals scored were the absolute screamers, and they scored for all the 4 goals they scored. I was going to come to you first, Phil, in terms of this. What did you think of the game the other night? Obviously, again, missing a lot of first team players, but it was kind of a blend of kind of the experienced players such as Matic, with likes of the young players such as Alanga play, and there was a nice blend of kind of youth, but also a bit of experience. And we did perform for large parts of the game.
Yeah, it was a good performance, great game, as you say. All the goals were, superb finishes, and for me, I think in the first half, you just mentioned him there, Alanga was probably the standout performer for me. I think he looks, really lively. He's really quick. He's got an eye for goal. Obviously, I think he's got a knack of being in the right place at the right time, obviously for the cross into the box, and he's obviously finished it really well. But yeah, again, obviously, there's quite a lot of good goals and stuff in pre-season. I think I'd seen he'd been linked with a move maybe to Fenerbahce. Obviously, I don't know how much truth there is in that, but again, if we can start recouping some money for the likes of players who probably won't want to be playing like Pereira and people like that, I think that's probably a good way to go.
Definitely, and you see players such as Andres Pereira, who look more or less every pre-season, like he does play very well, and I think when you look at the quality that he has, he does have a good range of pass. He can shoot from range. He is definitely a player who can definitely contribute maybe to a team like a Fenerbahce or maybe a Galatasaray or somewhere like that. I think Pereira definitely a move away would probably be the best thing for him. I think when you look at kind of some of the younger players, I thought Mengi myself at centre back, I thought he was very assured. I like the look of James Garner when he came on. I thought James Garner was his passing range was very good. His interceptions, his positional sense was very good too. And I think when you look at some of these younger players, you look at some of the players in the 23s from last season, like Hannibal, Shortiri, they looked very good technically. And I think maybe another year in the 23s or a loan move may do these players do the world of good, kind of going forward. But again, it was a good game to watch, and even looking at Brentford's side as well, they're a team I think who could cause problems in the Premier League for some teams next season. You see the way they played; they're organised at the back. They've a good forward in Ivan Toney as well. So it was a good workout for the lads. And again, it's all about building match fitness, for the upcoming season. Wayne, what was your overall thoughts on the game against Brentford the other night?
Yeah, a little bit like the Derby game and the QPR game. We've said that about we said it when we were reviewing the QPR game. That these games are about fitness. Obviously, entertaining in the goals that were scored. I think one of Brentford's was one of those welly ones. It wasn't really well struck, but he got his foot under it and belted it as hard as he could. Yeah, really good goals. Obviously, Pereira's goal was magnificent. And I think maybe I'll say the most controversial thing here, and it's something that we kind of touched on last time. We're talking about Lingard. I'm inclined to think that Lingard might get a chance. I know that the people talked about him getting a fee, in receiving a fee, Ollie, and sort of doing business with that. But I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, there's something in that makes me think that he's going to keep him around. And don't get me wrong, I know that that's going to bring criticism straight away, but he did do well at West Ham, and he does love playing for United, and there's some kind of quality in that. If you've got, and when I say some kind of quality, it brings something that Phil will know what I'm on about. The younger players that are attached to the club, and I know people will say, "Oh, it's not about passion and all that sort of stuff," but it is sometimes. It is sometimes that you do need that, and he has got a great character. Especially if we're going to be losing players, like, it looks 50-50 like Pogba might be out of the door. Ollie loves Pogba, so if he's going to go, he's going to want players around that he likes. And they do like Lingard. He's very well liked by a selection of that squad, and Ollie certainly does like him. So, there was a discipline problem a couple of years ago with the hotel room and everything like that. But he sort of recovered from that. I know he's had his own problems as well, but he seemed to really enjoy himself. He had the liberation, he had the pressure of playing away the pressure of playing at Old Trafford lifted off his shoulders at West Ham, and he played his best football that we've seen him play for years. It was kind of like the potential that he realised, that we hoped that he'd realise at United. Now, I'm not saying that he will see that form at United. I don't know how that's going to go. I just got this feeling that Ollie's going to stick with him, and probably he's worth more to us in that regard than he is as an asset. I don't know. I look at this with certain players like Pogba, and I think, is he worth more as an asset or as a player to us, or Martial? And I'm undecided. I'm really undecided with that, and it's a tough call for Ollie to make. I just think from what I've seen from Lingard, but it's the same with Pereira as well. You see him score a goal like he did the other night, and you just think, and again, this is going to sound so silly, and it is based in an opinion off pre-season, but when he's got time on the ball, his quality on the ball is actually really good. I'm not saying that he makes the right decisions all the time, because he doesn't, and I can get infuriated with him for it. But his quality on the ball, his striking is obviously second to none. It's absolutely magnificent, and his crossing of the ball is usually pretty good as well. And you can imagine him. I'm not saying always playing there, but maybe in the League Cup, filling in on the right hand side. Do you know what I mean? Because he's got that arching kind of cross on him. And I'm not saying again that he should stay around. I think probably the time is right for him to move on. But I just see, when I look at him, I think it's more or less a case of me looking at him and thinking, oh, it's a shame that he didn't realise his potential at United when you see what he's capable of, especially when he scores a goal like that. I mean, I've seen a couple of players score goals like that on the way out. I can remember Lee Martin. Very, very. I'm not talking about Lee Martin, FA Cup Lee Martin. I'm talking about the second Lee Martin, who was a tricky winger. Was he just before your time, Phil? That Lee Martin.
Lee played in my team. I'm good friend.
So Lee scored a couple of belting goals in pre-season, just before he was sold. And I remember thinking, do you know what? He had a little bit of talent as well. He saw players like that, and that's probably the case with Pereira. But I think it's just a case of that wanting the young players to succeed, and then when they do something good, it's like, oh, if only. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of like, that's the takeaway that I had from that. It's like, yeah, it was great to see, but also a case of like, I wish that these players had shown it a little bit more.
I think it's always a case of what if with Andreas Pereira, because like he's since 2014-15 when he came in, he did show early promise, and I think there's a lot of kind of what ifs, and I think you mentioned something, time on the ball. Like when he has time the ball, I said like his range of passing is good, his shooting is good. His movement, he's a quick player. But I think maybe in a different league he'd be able to maybe show them attributes a bit more, because when he was on loan at Valencia in La Liga, he showed that when he went with time on the ball, he showed his quality. Premier League, you don't get that. And I think it's just a shame. But again, look, because he came through the academy, you'd always like to see him do well. Whether it's with us or with somebody else, you'd always wish them the best. And just on Lingard as well, Wayne, I think when you look at the situation with Rashford just announcing that he's going to have the surgery and he's going to potentially miss the first 2-3 months of the season, I dare to say Jesse Lingard will stay at this club till at least January this year, because you look at it, like you look at the depth of the left-hand side. You'll have Lingard, you have Martial, Dan James. Ollie will want a big squad this year because it's not going to be like a COVID season. You're going to have Champions League, you're going to have Premier League. It's going to be, back to normal. So you're going to have depth in this squad. And I think, as you said, he likes Jesse Lingard. Lingard has shown with West Ham, and like people tend to forget, like you look at his kind of history at Manchester United. He scored in very big games. He's a big game player. He scored against like Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester City. I was at the FL Cup final when he scored that early goal. At Wembley against Leicester, FA Cup against Crystal Palace. Like, there's been moments where Jesse Lingard's delivered. It's just a case of sometimes it hasn't happened for him on a consistent basis. But when you look at the time before he went on loan, there was a lot of like personal things going on, stuff that was out of his control that kind of hindered his form. So the quality is most definitely there for Jesse Lingard. And I think, this season, with the way the fact Marcus Rashford is going to be out for these first couple of months, Lingard has a chance now to showcase that. I think there is going to be room for him to get a lot of game time and to show his quality, because there is qualities there in his game. Like his off the ball movement, his touch type passing, he's a very good finisher as well. So look, I think this season be interesting to see kind of what happens with him, especially in the first 3 months. I think that's where it'd be kind of make or break for Jesse Lingard at Manchester United. Next part of the show. Very excited for this part of the show. We're going to get to Phil Marsh's all-time Manchester United 11. Now, Phil has basis on many different variables. So we're doing this all-time Manchester United 11 of Phil on the back of our podcast with Martin Edwards, which if you drop down in the video link description, you can catch that on our audio platforms, and the link is in the video description. So after this podcast is finished, drop down, do click the link and check out our interview with Martin Edwards with regards to this topic. So Phil, you have come up with your all-time Manchester United 11, and just talk to us about your criteria for this 11 and kind of what you based it on.
Yeah, so obviously I've done this a few times over the years, and I think obviously a lot of my players are based on players that I've either seen or watched, or obviously been when I was at the club for 10 years, I've either played with them or obviously been to Old Trafford and watched him on a regular basis. So there is a couple which obviously I haven't had the pleasure of watching live, but I obviously know enough about them to know that they're, legends and deserve a place in my team. So yeah, that's basically what I've judged it on. Obviously there is a couple where I've maybe chopped and changed over the years, just because there is certain positions where I've got too many players that I'd want to put in there. So it is difficult obviously to pick an 11, but I have obviously picked one for today that I'm going to go with. There is a couple of players that I've picked in certain positions which I'll talk through and just obviously tell you why I've chose somebody over somebody else. But yeah, that's basically what I've done it on, just on my personal experiences really.
Yes. So
sorry to interject. It's funny to hear when you talk to different players about this, they always have like different kind of criteria. I talked to Martin Edwards obviously for the podcast, and he was very. I mean, first of all, Martin's seen everything, almost everything post-war. Do you know what I mean? The only player that he hadn't seen, they didn't feel comfortable putting in, was Duncan Edwards. And when we talked, he was quite relieved about that. You know what I mean? Because Duncan's such an obvious name to put in. But it's like, where do you put him? Well, a lot of people struggle with that. They think they've just got to put him in anywhere, and he usually fills a hole. But at the same time, it creates a problem because you're leaving out 2 or 3 other players. But then you have some players who will only choose the players that they played with. It's always fascinating, but I'm really looking forward to hearing what Phil's got to say.
Yeah, exactly. So, Phil, talk to us and talk us through your all-time Manchester United, and let's go from 1 to 11.
Okay, so goalkeepers, obviously it was a choice between 2 for me. Peter Schmeichel, obviously the obvious choice, which I think he is the actual keeper that I chose. Just think obviously for the longevity and obviously winning the treble and being such a big presence, and the way he used to sort of express himself as a player as well. Just for me, I think he just edges Van der Sar. obviously Van der Sar was the keeper at the club when I was there. He obviously, was another fantastic goalkeeper, won numerous titles and was a great person. Obviously, I got to meet Edwin and obviously train with him on certain occasions, and he was a great guy. So there was the two that I sort of narrowed down. But if I had to be sort of, pick one, it'd just be Peter Schmeichel, just for obviously the longevity he was at the club and obviously the success that he had throughout his career at Man United. So that would be my number one.
Definitely, and like you mentioned, two goalkeepers there in Van der Sar and Schmeichel, who look both in their own right Champions League and Premier League winning goalkeepers. And you look at many team players, former players, 1 to 11s. It's definitely a toss up between the two of them, and it's two very good choices.
I think for me, Schmeichel, the edge what Schmeichel has over Van der Sar is that for probably 3 or 4 years, Schmeichel was the best goalkeeper in the world. Probably even longer than that. And I don't think Van der Sar was probably just as consistent for us, but not as he was never at that height where you would say he was the best in the world.
Yeah, I think obviously Van der Sar was a little bit unlucky because at the points when obviously he was being so successful at Man United, there was so many other world-class goalkeepers around who were obviously doing similar things in other leagues, likes of, keepers in Real Madrid and Barcelona and Bayern Munich, etc. So I think, that's why Schmeichel for me just sort of pips Edwin there to that number one spot.
With Edwin, wasn't it the case that he went to Fulham because he was at Juventus and they signed Buffon? Can you imagine if they had Buffon and Van der Sar to rotate?
Unbelievable, yeah. But yeah, good because obviously he ended up at United, so it worked out well for us in that respect.
And like when you look at the Van der Sar signing for Manchester United, ultimately we were trying to replace Schmeichel for years. Like Barthez, Tim Howard, Rijkaard, keepers like that, Taibbi, keepers like we multiple keepers before we signed Edwin Van der Sar. And like when you think about it, he was like 7 years later, he was the replacement for Peter. So it's kind of when you look at that, the way it works out, it took time. And like world class goalkeepers, it does take time to replace them. And when a new keeper comes in, they have a big kind of those shoes to fill. So again, definitely two great goalkeepers in Manchester United's history, and that definitely Peter does pip it probably for me as well, because his leadership skills were, apart from his goalkeeping, his leadership skills were second to none. Curlers 87 says here as well, Van der Sar was world class in Italy, ideal replacement even though we got him later in his career. Yeah, we got him at the age, I believe it was 36, 37 in around that time. So like that again, that's not, when you talk about goalkeepers, that's not even, when they're past their best, like goalkeepers can play until like they're 40, 41, 42. So that we got him probably at a prime goalkeeper age and 36 years of age. Phil, you're right back.
Right back. Okay, so obviously Gary Neville going to be me right back. I think he's the obvious choice for probably a lot of people. I just think because of obviously coming through the ranks and obviously got to know Gary, obviously being in Carrington and training and stuff. I think what a lot of people don't appreciate about the likes of someone like Gary Neville coming through at a time with the rest of the players in the class of 92, like Scholes, Beckham, Butt, Giggs, etc. I think he was, nowhere near the sort of levels of ability in terms of raw talent as the likes of the other lads who have just mentioned. I think he obviously had to work so hard and put in a lot more effort and stuff away from the training ground to sort of maintain that sort of level. And I think that's something that I think a lot of young kids and a lot of people nowadays in clubs need to sort of take from that kind of thing. And Gary was obviously a magnificent player, but he'd be honest enough to tell you himself that he as a young kid, he always felt as though he was behind a lot of them. And so obviously, do what he's done and play the amount of games he has for Manchester United and be as successful he has been, then that just speaks volumes for the kind of person that he is. And he's obviously the number two that I've gone with at right back there for me.
I think about Gary Neville is he worked so hard, didn't he, to maintain the longevity he had in that position. Like, he played for so many years in that right back position and really had it nailed down until like Rafael came in, really. And look, I know Wes Brown deputised there for a season as well, in 2008. But like, Gary Neville really had that position nailed down for years, and he worked so hard. And like, you look at the partnerships he had on that right hand side, like with David Beckham especially, like how he'd bomb on ahead of him, get crosses into the box, be up and down, and be so consistent with his position and tackling as well. And he was just a professional as well. You could see that he loved the club. He wore his heart in his sleeve. And again, like, he's someone, like, I know Jamie Carragher quoted years ago, no one wants to grow up to be a Gary Neville. Well, look at the amount of class young English right backs there is out there right now. They're all grown up to be Gary Nevilles. So I think you look at it and say he was definitely the model professional for a right back, especially for Manchester United, but for country as well, down the years as well. So Gary Neville definitely a shoe in for the right back position. And look, again, for me, just the model professional and someone who just lives and breathes Manchester United.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he's great player. Like I said, possibly not the most talented, but then at the same time, as Phil expressed, he made the most of what he did have, and sometimes you need players like that in the squad as well.
Definitely, 100%. And even when he took over that captaincy after Roy Keane, he done well to kind of re-mend that dressing room together and help us through that kind of rebuild for that 3 Premier Leagues in a row, Champions League winning side as well. He was a stalwart in that squad as well. Phil, who would be your centre-back pairing?
Okay, so I've gone for Vidic and Ferdinand. Obviously, that is based on my time at the club. Obviously, I was there when them two were the main partnership. There was others that I considered, Pallister, Stam, were other names that I sort of, looked at. But for me, I think, obviously, if you look at a partnership like we were talking about before with Maguire and Varane in terms of chemistry, I think those two was probably, a pairing that had everything. Ferdinand was comfortable on the ball, could drive out of defence, pick a pass, and Vidic was, an absolute warrior. Loved putting his head in where it hurts. And for me, them two was like an unbelievable partnership for a good few years. And obviously the success that they brought to the club was second to none. A funny story, actually, I remember about Nemanja Vidic. He signed for the club, and about 2 or 3 days after he'd signed, he played in the reserves for us. We were playing Wigan, and obviously we had a really good side in the reserves. Used to win majority of the time, and always had good performances. And this one particular game, Vidic obviously had signed. Not many people knew a lot about him at this point. And he played, and we got battered 4-0. And to be honest, he didn't have a great game. I think, he'd obviously, been flew over and he'd done his medical, and he'd probably not had much training and probably not been, feeling his best, but he just had a torrid time. And I think he slipped for one of the goals, and we was all sort of scratching our heads thinking, like, who's this guy? Like, who we've signed? Doesn't really look, much good, which, happens. And obviously, a couple of weeks later, he got his chance in the first team, and then obviously the rest is history. But, sometimes when you first see an initial, you have your first sort of impression on a player, I remember thinking, like, what's going on here? Like, who's this? Who they've signed? Because there was a few of them over the years with my time at the club, other players like Cleberson and Jemba, etc. But obviously Vidic proved everybody wrong, and was obviously, one of the players that, the fans loved him because of the way he was. He'd wear his heart on his sleeve every single week, and he went down as a cult hero at the club. So yeah, him and Ferdinand for me definitely was the partnership I'd pick in that centre half spot. Yeah,
and Nemanja Vidic was someone who, you look at the kind of this era of defenders, there's not many defenders out there who were a defender like Vidic. Like, he put his head to everything. He read the game really well. And there's one thing I like to say as well, people don't really mention this too much, but he was good on the ball as well. Like, there was him and Rio were both good on the ball, coming out from the back, and he chipped in with a fair few goals as well. So, like, Nemanja Vidic was definitely someone who was a great partner and a great kind of really complimented Rio Ferdinand at the back. And I said he didn't probably have the easiest of starts, but he did, when he settled in and he got into that settled partnership with Rio Ferdinand at the back, it was just something else. And you look at our clean sheet record that we broke in 2008, 2009, breaking the all-time British clean sheet record that season. That speaks volumes for that centre-back partnership.
Yeah, they were great, absolutely great. As a partnership, they were. It's funny because Vidic arrived as pretty much an unknown, but Fergie couldn't have had a better complement for Rio. They were perfect for each other. Yeah,
100%. And again, like you look at centre backs we've had down the years, it's absolutely ridiculous the quality we had, and the fact Nemanja Vidic could come from a small transfer fee, coming from the unknown, and comes into probably one of our best ever centre back partnerships. It's absolutely amazing. Phil, who would be your left back in your team?
Okay, so it was between two. My first choice was Patrice Evra, somebody again who I was lucky enough to play with and get to know at the club. A proper character. You've probably seen some of his stuff that he does now on social media. That's the way he was then. He was always, laughing and joking and all that. But obviously, again, a fantastic player and did remarkable in his time at the club. But for me, I've gone for Dennis Irwin just because I just think, he's got everything for me. He was unbelievable passer of the ball. He was reliable in terms of he scored. Can't remember how many penalties, but big goals certain times. He could play. He was versatile. He could play. He didn't have to just play left back. He could play anywhere across the back. And I just think he was, a massive part of that team when it was, such a successful team. I think Dennis was probably someone who went under the radar a little bit, but I think a lot of United fans do appreciate how much, he brought to the table, and he was, Ferguson, spoke about how reliable and how much he trusted Dennis, and I think he was more of an all-round player for me, so that's why I chose Irwin just slightly over Patrice.
That left back position, I've watched many different podcasts, listened to different podcasts, watched many different shows, and to see the debate on left back, it's always close between Patrice Evra and Dennis Irwin. Me being Irish, not even going to lie to you lads, Dennis Irwin will be my left back literally all day. He's Mr. Consistent, Mr. Reliable, and it's just top class. I wish I got to see him in his prime. I got to see him in his last 2 years. I was really young, but just a model professional he was.
Irwin was, Fergie said he was always a 7 out of 10, didn't it? That's what he said. Yeah. But I think what Fergie actually meant by that, and not to do him a disservice, because Evra sometimes could be a 4 out of 10. He could have a stinker. Irwin could give you 8 or 9, but he'd never drop below 7. That was the point he was saying. He would never go below 7. You never saw him get beat by anyone. I never saw him get embarrassed by anyone. And he was a fantastic footballer as well. You mentioned the penalties, Phil. He scored some free kicks. Some belting free kicks for a while. He was such a good player, so reliable. One of the best memories I have of Irwin is the goal that he scored against Wimbledon in the '94 Cup. Oh my God, about 50 passes. Well, maybe not 50, but around 20 to 30 passes at that team, and then Irwin starts playing the 1-2s on the left-hand side, and then rolls it in with a toe poke. Just absolutely magical player. And yeah, he scored a goal at Oldham in the semi-final as well, didn't he, in that cup run? Kanchelski scored a great goal, but Irwin scored a belter as well. Yeah, he was fantastic, great in that team in particular. And I always remember he got the yellow card, 2 yellows against Liverpool in the treble season, so he was suspended for the cup final. So he missed out on a cup final, missed out on one of the treble medals, which is just. People always talk about Keane and Scholes missing the European Cup final, but it was just as big a tragedy for me that Irwin missed the FA Cup final, because that was a disgrace of a decision. He was magnificent.
Definitely. And again, there's someone who, you talk about consistency, imagine what he'd be worth in today's game now. Unbelievable price.
Yeah.
Phil, what formation have you got? Have you gone 4-4-2? Have you gone 4-3-3?
Yeah, I've gone 4-4-2.
So who's your right-sided midfielder?
So on the right, it was narrowed down to obviously Beckham, just because of the partnership he had with Gary Neville, who he had at right back. But inevitably, I've gone for Ronaldo just because of, obviously when I was at the club, he came in at the same time. I was there, he was a young kid, and then, maybe took him a season or two to get to the pace of the Premier League and stuff. But obviously, for them couple of seasons, he was just absolutely ridiculous. And obviously getting to, play with him and train with him and see firsthand how good the kid was. And obviously what he's gone on to do in the game, he's got to be in there, even though he's not been there, for as long as other players that people might put in that position. I just think he was that good, and I've, not a bad word to say about him. I think, the work rate that he put in off the training ground, he was always first in and last out. He was always working on his free kicks and working on his, skills and all that kind of thing, which, that's a massive part of the game. If you put extra work rate in and you put extra effort in, the results are there to be seen. And, he's the hardest working player, and there's no surprise why he's the best player in the world for me. So he's a definite player who's got to be in my team. So he's on the right hand side for me.
Just like say about Ronaldo, when I growing up, he was my idol. Like I remember he signed 2003 the red Vodafone jersey. I remember having him on the back of my jersey and just see him do all, like, back then, just all the step overs, taking the player. Now I used to wind my mother and father up watching him, to be honest with you, because so he used to kind of, though you lose the ball or whatever watching the game, but I just used to love how brash he was, and then to see kind of the development of him years later, it's just absolutely fantastic. And look, a shit-win, if you're talking about any all-time United 11, it's always a debate getting Cristiano in there, and just see what he came to United as a boy, left as a man, and seeing how he's developed, as you said, into the best player in the world, and in the conversation for the greatest of all time. It's absolutely great to see. Just with regards to this, Wayne, what's your thoughts on Ronaldo in the team?
Ronaldo, obviously, I mean, Phil, he's going to pick Ronaldo because he's one of the best players that's ever played for the club, and Phil managed to witness firsthand that sort of period where he had all that difficulty, and he showed that bravery, a lot of bravery from outside and from the outside sort of criticism as well. Because there was a period, 2006, the World Cup, where everyone thought he was going to go. And first of all, bravery from Fergie to keep him. He'd been there before with Beckham, but there was a lot of hostility towards Ronaldo in 2006, and kept him. And that was the turning point for him. Not so much keeping him after the World Cup, but that summer was the turning point because he left. He came back and he looked a foot taller. He looked like he put on 2 stone in muscle. And that was over the summer. It was like, what's happened to this kid? And he suddenly just transformed. And then he had a great season. And then it was like the season after that where I think Rennie Mullenstein took him for some dedicated coaching and just said, stop trying to score the perfect goal. Try and score every goal. And then he started doing it. And that was it. It just like went up and up and up. It was just crazy. His development was unbelievable. But yeah, it's great to listen to Phil like talking about what he witnessed firsthand, because it's just great to have that insight. But yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, obviously you're going to have Ronaldo in your team.
100%. Phil, who would be your central midfield pairing?
Okay, so this was probably the most difficult for me. I've obviously tossed and chopped and changed a little bit over the years, but for me, I think Paul Scholes is a shoe in there for me. He was, probably when I was there, along with probably Ronaldo, the best player I'd ever seen live in training. Just, in awe of the guy, actually watching him on a day-to-day basis and just seeing what he could do with the ball. I think, every player who's played with or against Scholes has mentioned how good he was. All the best midfielders in the world always say, Paul Scholes, Iniesta, Xavi, Zidane. They speak, highly of him. And for me, he's probably, one of United's all-time greatest ever players, just because of how good he was, and a lot of players say the same thing. So he's a definite in there for me. The other one I looked at is, obviously, it was between Roy Keane and Brian Robson. In the end, I've gone for Robson just because I know how much of a legend he was. He was a little bit before my time. I was only a kid. Obviously, I've seen videos and I've seen stuff, but I actually played with Brian Robson a couple of years ago in a charity game against Wigan, and played centre mid with him. And obviously meeting him and being such an amazing guy, and to still be able to play the way he did at the age of, I think he's 60 odd now, was just like unbelievable. And obviously he's a massive legend at the club, and somebody who I think would be a great partnership with Scholes in the middle of the park there, similar to Roy Keane. But I just think he'd get the edge, just because of obviously how much the club obviously means to him, and he means to the fans.
Phil, you when Vida played in the reserves, was that when you were playing at right back in the reserves?
No, I think that was slightly before. I played in the right back role a little bit later on. He sort of came in and played centre back, and then I sort of went right back when that was a time, obviously, when Rennie Meulenstein took over the reserves, and at the time we had quite a few right backs injured, and a few had gone out on loan, and we just really didn't have any other player who could maybe play in that position. And Rennie just sort of pulled me to one side and said, "Listen, we're really struggling in a right back position. I think you've got the attributes to play there. You're good on the ball, you're quick, you've got a great passing range. How about giving it a try and see how you go?" And at the start, I was a little bit dubious, because obviously being a striker and playing more attacking positions all my career, obviously I was a little bit worried about the defensive part of the game, and thinking, if I get up against a fast winger or someone who's tricky, I'm not really, very good at defending. But obviously Rennie worked with me and, trusted me, and I did a lot of work with the likes of Johnny Evans and Paul McShane, who, with the centre-back pairing. And I obviously ended up playing there, and I did really well for a couple of months. I remember playing my first game against Leeds at Hyde, and I got man of the match, and that was my first game there. So obviously that filled me with a bit of confidence, and, just happy to be playing and helping the team out. And I said to, Rennie showed that trust in, and which made me, feel as though he thought a lot of me, that he could trust me to play in that position. And yeah, just enjoyed, seeing a different part of the game as well, learning a different sort of position, which, helped me in the long run, because obviously if you can play in different kind of positions, obviously what the sort of what they're doing in that position, and what you want to expect as a striker. Your fullbacks, you want balls getting played down the channel or into your feet, and when you get in that final third, what kind of crosses you expect. So I was lucky enough to, put in some good balls, and put in some good performances in that period when I played at right back.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So not Vida, but you had Johnny Evans. So you've played alongside Johnny Evans, Brian Robson, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. There's not going to be that many people in United who can claim for those players.
Yeah, very lucky. And obviously I played with PK as well, who's another one. He, at that point as well, who's gone on to be, one of the world's best centre-halves, winning everything at Barcelona.
You made all these players. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I must have rubbed off on all these players. So, you know what I mean?
Do you know what? It definitely, if you're doing a quiz, I'm telling you now, it'll be definitely one of the greatest Manchester United quiz questions. Who to play with, Ollie, Robson, PK, and Paul McShane. Telling you now, that'll be a great question, 100%. I
mean, to be honest, when I think back, like the some of the players that I've been lucky enough to play with, and obviously, like Tom Eaton now, another one who's playing in United's first team, played with Tom for years, went to the Milk Cup, played in the Youth Cup, went on loads of different tours and stuff with the likes of Tom. so many great players: Darren Gibson, Tom Cleverley, Danny Welbeck, Danny Simpson. List goes on. There's loads of players who's had great careers who was in and around that team with me in the reserves and around the first team at that time, and just lucky really to have been a part of the club at that point. Obviously I would have maybe liked to have got a couple more opportunities in the first team, but when the club and the players were so good at that period, you can't sort of argue with it really. Every player in every position was an international or a world class player. So just to end up playing in the cup with Solskjaer and Alan Smith for me was a dream come true and something that I'll obviously always treasure. So yeah, just fantastic memories.
Yeah, and again, like the fact that you've had the privilege to play at Manchester United, played so many players, like you must have just so many memories and the things that you'll hold to you for the rest of your life. In terms of your team, who do you have on your left-hand side?
There's only got to be one choice, right? You can't. There's no.
Yeah,
did anyone else play them?
Ryan Giggs is just another one who's nailed on for that position for me. I think starting at the club from such a young age and breaking into the first team at the age he did and becoming one of the all-time greatest appearance. I think is he all-time?
Yeah, by distance.
Yeah, so he's got to be in there, and a lot of people may think he didn't quite score as many goals as what he should have done for the appearances and stuff like that. But for someone to come into a club at the age he did and to have such a big impact, and again longevity and the amount of trophies that he's won, for me he's got to be someone who's in there on the left hand side. Obviously the goal against Arsenal in the FA Cup stands out as probably his best goal for the club. But for me as well, getting to know him, on a personal level, he was a great guy. Loved his rugby league. Obviously, I come from St Helens, which is a rugby town, so we used to have some interesting chats about the rugby and stuff. And he was always somebody you could have a chat with and have a laugh. He was a bit of a practical joker at times, but a great guy and humble considering how big of a player he was, and somebody who's a hero worldwide.
Yeah, definitely. And you talk about like decorated players, maybe the most decorated player in Premier League history, and again just had all the qualities and the way he adapted his game. People sleep on this as well. The way he adapted his game to go from a flying winger into a sitting midfield player, I think that just showed his great football brain and his qualities. And Sir Alex could, even when he was coming towards the twilight of his career, Sir Alex could rely on him so much in big games. So definitely model professional and someone who epitomised again Manchester United as a player, especially coming through our academy as well through the class of 92. Wayne, what's your thoughts on Ryan Giggs?
Yeah, one of my two favourite players growing up, Eric and Giggs. Yeah, everything that Phil said is right about Ryan. The thing as well about him, to put into context of how good he was. I mean, a lot of people did get on him sometimes, said he wasn't consistent, that his delivery wasn't consistent, or he didn't score enough goals. I would stick my neck out and say that I don't think. Let's say that his last full season, was his poorest, because of his age. Or there was one in the 90s, 94, 95, where he got a bit of stick. So there were a couple of seasons. But if you took Giggs at his poorest, I think that's still been a better level than any one on the left since. And I know some of those players have scored 20 goals from the left. No one's been as good as Giggs at his worst on that side. He was that good, without question. So yeah, definitely the primary choice there.
100%. Phil, I am fascinated to hear your front two, because you're at Manchester United at a time that we've had many great forwards, and obviously we've had many great forwards throughout the club as well. So I'm absolutely fascinated to hear your front two.
Yeah, again, this was another position that the two strikers have gone for. Again, could have been one of many. Obviously, my earliest memories, watching the club was York and Cole, obviously, and they had a unbelievable partnership. So there was obviously, a great partnership, but I've gone with Rooney just because he's somebody who's I can relate to. I was a similar age when he came to Man United. I'd seen him playing at Everton. I'd played against him a few times, and I just thought, this kid's special. He's definitely gonna be a big player, and obviously to come in and score a hat trick on your debut, I think he said himself. Obviously, being a Scouser, he had to come in and make a big impact pretty early on. Otherwise, the fans might have got on his back. And obviously, to go on and to do what he's done, he's United's all-time leading goal scorer, and to do what he's done as well for England on an international stage as well. I think he's got to be someone who's definitely in the team. Again, someone you can mention about as he got a little bit older, could adapt his game, dropping into the pockets, maybe playing a little bit deeper, his passing range. Some of the goals he scored, absolutely unbelievable. Goals from the halfway line, volleys, chips, every kind of finish. He had it in his locker. And obviously, again, getting to know Wayne on a personal level, fantastic person. Always had time for the younger lads, doing some finishing, advice, anything like that. Great person. And for me, he's someone who I had to put in my team, along with my favourite United player in terms of in my position. I used to just love going to Old Trafford, watching him, was Ruud van Nistelrooy. Again, probably the best finisher I've ever worked with. Used to do training, and obviously after training sometimes we do some shooting. The strikers would all come together, and he was just so clinical. It was unbelievable. Like, I used to just ask him, and he just said, it's just practice, repetition, doing it every single day. And watching him at Old Trafford every week in that era when he was there was a joy to watch. He was somebody who I thought, I'm in a position similar to Ruud, and I want to try and pick up as many things as I can from the strikers at the club at that time. And just watching him, the movement, sometimes wasn't that good, but obviously when he got in them positions, he just seemed to be like cold as ice. He just, never missed. And he was somebody who I think, again, who maybe was a little bit underrated from certain people, but for me, I used to just absolutely love watching him. And his goal record speaks for itself. And obviously went on to Real Madrid after that and carried on, and was probably one of the best strikers around at that period. And again, he's somebody who I just absolutely love, just because I'm a striker and he was the main man at the time at the club. I think there's not many players that come into Man United straight away and the full crowd are singing Ruud after 2 or 3 games. He just sort of the fans took to him straight away, and he was somebody who I think there's not many Man United fans would say a bad word about him. So yeah, that'd be me front two.
Yeah, Ruud van Nistelrooy and Wayne Rooney. Like, for me, when I pick any of my all-time 11s, I always find the front two probably the toughest for me, because we've had so many top players in that position. But Ruud van Nistelrooy was so clinical. He always knew where to be, and his finishing was second to none. And look, you can't have I feel you can't have an all-time Manchester United 11 without our all-time top goal scorer in it as well, like in Wayne Rooney. And again, you mentioned how he adapted his game, went from a raw number 9 to someone who dropped into a 10 role, to drop deep, link up play, and someone who was just fantastic to watch. He was like a street footballer on a normal football pitch. That's what Wayne Rooney was, and just someone who, again, I know he came from Liverpool, was someone when he wore the United shirt, he really put in 100% every single week, and someone who I just love watching growing up, Manchester United. But that is fantastic 11 from Phil, in terms of all different players, ranging from Vidic and Ferdinand, obviously Robson and Scholes, fantastic partnership in midfield. And then look, you have Ruud van Nistelrooy and Wayne Rooney up front, two fantastic strikers. Let us know, guys, in the comments if you're watching live, or if you're watching on the replay, drop it into the comments. Let us know what you think of Phil's lineup, and also give us your all-time Manchester United 11. in that. And also do remember to check out our website at www.talkofthedevils.co.uk, and also don't forget to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and we do have much more podcasts coming with myself and Phil, and also Wayne and Paul Parker as well, and also interviews to come with former Manchester United players as well. So do check that out, and make sure right below Phil there's the notifications button on YouTube there, so hit the bell notifications every time we do go live or have a video up. You will get the notification straight away, and you'll be able to catch our content as soon as possible. So thanks very much to Wayne and Phil for coming on this evening, and thanks very much everyone for listening and also watching live here today, and we'll be back soon.